Oh. Welcome to the Town of Emmitsburg's town meeting for the evening of Monday, May 12th, 2025. At this time, if you could please silence your cell phones. And I welcome all of you here tonight, and I invite you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will make a note that Commissioner Sweeney is in the building and he should be here momentarily. Just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so for future meetings, we have the Parks and Rec Committee meeting coming up on May 25th, 2025 here at the town office at 7 p.m. And our next Board of Commissioners meeting will be June 2nd at 7 p.m. here in the town office and on Zoom. Are there any other meetings that need to be announced? Nope. Okay. Hearing none, moving on to commissioner comments. Are there any commissioners who wish to make comments?
I'm good.
Good. I'm good. Okay, so moving on to mayor's comments.
Just real quick. I'm thinking we're getting some good news. We hear that funding for the National Emergency Training Center, National Fire Academy is in the process of being restored. So hopefully that's a good thing, and we'll be able to move along there. Also, I want to apologize to the commissioners if any of you received phone calls, emails, or letters. As a matter of fact, we got some letters today in the mail in reference to an interview I did on radio in reference to the Fire Academy. About 3/4 of the way through the interview, I realized that, how do I say this correctly, that this wasn't an interview that was going to be a favorable thing for Emmitsburg, that it was leaning more towards the left. And of course, after the interview came out, we started receiving phone calls, emails, death threats, the whole work. So if you all experienced any of those, I apologize. It was a learning experience for me that I didn't know how angry the world is out there right now. So being very, very careful with any more interviews. Okay, thanks.
I just want to say, I appreciate you speaking up and willing to speak out. Just because somebody has a political difference than you and their opinions of how things should run doesn't mean you can go to personal attacks. You can disagree with somebody all you want. It's a disagreement. It doesn't have to get personal. And I think you kept it above board that way. So, even though it got that feedback and I saw some of the emails and everything, there's nothing wrong with what you did.
I was just going to piggyback on that because of your advocacy. I believe that's a large reason why we have potential good news coming in the future. So thank you for your advocacy for the in-person training. Okay. Commissioner Sweeney, did you have any comments?
No.
Okay. All right. We don't have any public comments, correct? Okay. We do not have any administrative business. We do not have a consent agenda. This is the type of meeting we should always have. Okay. Agenda items. We have a couple big ones tonight, and I think some of these the big ones tend to fall at the end and then we're tired. So I was council wondering if you would be open to moving discussion of water rates up to the top first. Is there a consensus to move that up to number 1?
I'm fine with it.
Is that okay? Yes. Okay. All right. So in our packets, we don't have any new information to discuss, although I think we kind of beat the horse to death last time. So if we were to pick back up after we've had a week of rest, is anybody willing to start the discussion?
I just want to go back to same thing I said last time. to me, it's unethical to approve something that runs at a deficit and everything. So I think that you gotta at least meet that. My personal preferences, and you need money just for some repairs. And last time I said 15% to me seemed a good compromise. And on top of it, and looking at the budget for this year, the water fund currently is anticipated to have $116,000 in excess to the numbers from the last meeting. So I think, putting those two together, that's what it is. I mean, I think the key here is I haven't seen any commissioner here comfortable with 36%. So now it comes down to a compromise and where can we settle on?
Right, I
I
think
said-
that's where we got stuck last time.
Right. And I think I'm staying with, I just proposed 15%. That's the middle of the road. It gives us some excess, the 966 thing. And I think with some other stuff that should suffice. But I also want to make sure that if we remove the current ordinance, we put something in there, make sure it stays that whether it's the consumer price index, the LIBOR, or inflation rate, that every year is tied to something like that, that it automatically happens. I don't want to go back and have 20 years and no water raises. So if the council deadlocks and does nothing, it automatically increases by a minimum amount.
Okay, so I hear 15 and you're proposing, or this can't, well, this is just proposing like a 15%, and then after that down to CPI unless the council and the staff
Intervenes.
intervenes, and it'll kind of force everybody to go back and
Look at it every year.
expensive.
But even if they deadlock and don't want to do anything, the water rate doesn't stay stagnant.
Okay.
Prices are going to go up. So this puts an automatic raise in it, even if you do nothing.
Okay.
It's just we can debate on what that rate should be. Should it be the inflation rate? Should it be CPI? Should it be LIBOR? I'm per my accounting, I always go to the CPI.
Mhm. Okay. Any others? Yes, Commissioner Turnquist.
So as I think Kevin stated, our last meeting, we were deadlocked. And I've thought about it a lot. I want to compromise, with the group when there's room to do so. If we can't compromise and come to an agreement and agree on a number, then the 36% is going to go forward if we do nothing. So I ran the numbers over the weekend. I have some information to share on where we can make some adjustments to the budget and have a nice reserve fund available if we agree to make those changes. So I'm willing to compromise and go with the 15% because I really don't want to see 36 go through automatically.
Thank you. I'm kind of where you are. I would like to see it a little bit lower than 15, but if that's a consensus, that seems like a good middle ground. Commissioner Hoover, Commissioner Sweeney, thoughts?
Can I see what you're proposing to change in what reserves we're going to have left over?
Yeah, I brought copies. And what I'll do is I'll just go through it.
This was the 15%.
Yes, the 15%. So our 90-day reserve comes out to 231,000. We always want to meet a 90-day reserve if we can to qualify for loans and funding, grant funding. So as Kevin mentioned, we're expected to have 116,000 left over at the end of FY25 based on the FY25 budgeted expenses minus the actual estimated expenses. If we increase it by 15%, we're looking at an additional income of 126,000. 80,000 in benefits were moved from other funds into the water fund. So I'm suggesting that at least for FY26, we restore those benefits to the original departments, and that will restore 80,000 into the water fund. Our OT is listed at 25,000. If we cut 5,000 there, FY24 and FY25, we didn't exceed 20K, so 20K should hopefully be close to being enough for FY26. That would save us 5,000. If we move the donations for the vigilant hose and the activities building to the general fund, that would save almost 13,000. And that would be a best practice if we want to talk about that further. The operating supply budget line, it increased by 115% or 66K. If we split the increase, leaving half of that increase in the fund and send the other half to reserves, that would give us another buffer in reserves of 33K. Chemicals increased by 53% or 17K. Again, if we split that increase, half remaining in the fund and half going to reserves, we would save almost 9,000. Repairs and maintenance increased by 32% or almost 43K. Again, splitting that increase, we could save 21,000. Our capital outlay increased by 1,158% or almost 28,000. Again, splitting the increase, we could save almost 14,000. So the total, based on all of those suggested changes, would be $417,086. Our net fund income, which is the difference between the proposed FY26 revenue and expenses, is 42K. Our restricted cash, which is set aside for infrastructure improvements, is 259,000. And I'm not sure currently what our existing reserves are, but those changes would give us a reserve budget of 718,000. So I think there's room in the budget with the 15% and these other changes to have a nice reserve for emergencies and even possibly system upgrades.
When you say reserves in what account?
Water fund. This is water fund.
So all these are water fund
Yes.
allocations to and from.
Yes.
So when you're split in half in any one of these, half remains in the fund, water fund. Half goes to reserve. What do you mean by the half?
The cash reserves for the water fund.
If I use the one at 33,255, operating supplies increased by 11.5 by 115% or 66,000. So half remains in the fund, half of what, the increase?
Yes, only half of the increase, not half of the line item, just half of the increase. Since the increases are considerably high.
So the increase of 17,000, was it 17? No, I'm sorry, of the 66,000. So that increase, half of that.
Yeah, half the increase would stay in the water fund. And the other half of the increase, we'd reduce it essentially and move it to cash reserves for water fund.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm only seeing an increase in operating supplies in the water fund of 16,000. So I'm not sure where the 66,000 is coming from. Because in my budget, I only see an increase from FY24. Budget FY25. The budget and operating supplies was roughly 108,000. And in FY26, the budget's 124,400, which is a difference of 16,465. So I'm not sure where that number is coming from.
I used our actual estimated expenses, which are just under 58,000. So even though the FY25 budget was 124,000, we only spent 58,000 in FY25.
Yeah, we have some large purchases that are set to be done still under operating supplies. Because typically we do wait towards the end of the year to spend some of the larger items, just to be sure of how the budget goes. Trying to line these columns up here. So, yeah. I mean, I can list everything that we have under repair or under the operating supplies for that fund or for the water fund. And like I said, I do have Jared and Jimmy here to address anything that's in that budget. But yeah, I'm only showing a $16,000 increase.
Well, that's based on the FY25 budget, but we
Right.
have to look at the actuals because that's what we actually spent.
Understand that, but but what's left over is estimated. And with the limited amount of time that we had, these are just estimates, and a lot of this money is still yet to be spent.
So just,
So then just,
Go ahead,
so
I'm
your
sorry.
forecast, and
Right.
the number she's using is the forecast. So the forecast doesn't really include future spending like it says it does.
We do our best.
I
yes.
get it.
We
I
do
know
our
it's
best,
hard. It's an
and-
estimate.
And as you know, most places spend a lot of money to pay people to do forecasting. And as you know, our accountant wears many, many hats.
Hats and you
so
don't have the best system to do it on. I'm
do not.
right there with you on
do
that.
not.
I'm just, when I look at that, me personally, I'm like, okay, they took their best faith estimate of what the spending is going to be for the rest of the year and included that in that number.
Right.
And that's where, when I look at it, I base it. I said, okay, this is what we spent. This is what's expected. This is the budget. Here's where the money falls out. If those numbers were saying, no, we're really going to spend a budget, that's a different equation. And
so.
Yeah, I mean, just because there's money remaining in the budget doesn't mean we should spend it. I mean, we should be really prudent with, our expenditures between, what do we have? This is May. We only have one more month. So you're saying we're going to spend an additional 60,000 that we didn't account for?
So right now, off the top of my head, I know just last week alone, I approved 3,000 for the manhole lifter, 3,500 for the line locator. So these estimates were done March 25th. So we had all the month of April and half of May. Excuse me. To also have made purchases. So I know right off the top of my head, I've already done those two. And looking through here, 4,800 for an NTU meter and 2,900 for CL2 scales, 4,000 for an automatic plant valve. Not all of it's going to be spent. You're right. Not everything, but the majority of it should be spent. That's why it's in here.
Can I just,
Also have some.
can,
Also, take into consideration, there are some other line items that currently are over budget. And at the end of the day, the ones that come in under help account for things that went over during the course of the year. So you can't just look at a single line item and narrow it down quite like that sometimes either.
yeah, no, that's very, very true. When I ran, and again, I used the forecast numbers and everything out there, and that's where it came up with this $116,000. I looked at what budget, and what it was going out the door. If we're spending that money, then everyone's there, that gets rid of that buffer line, that's in the totality between everything that's under and over budget.
But that buffer line will be whatever the balance left is come June 30th, that's not been spent or allocated
Right.
prior to that June 30th date.
Right.
So
But if,
transferring the money there then makes it restricted that you may or may not be able to use it.
right. So, but
if you need it throughout the year for operating.
but
Well, if we move it, I'm sorry.
if we had, like I said, when I looked at it, I figured 116 in totality between the pluses and minuses, everything out there. If we have expenses that we know are coming before the end of the year that will be part of this fiscal year, have to take that 116 out. That's basic accounting. It's just, when I looked at those numbers, like I said, I based it on that, and it happens. That's part of forecasting. I'm not gonna say nail you to a cross on something. I'm gonna count it. This stuff happens. I'm not gonna fault you for that. It's just that is something to look at.
well, so are we looking specific? sorry, I can't do back and forth without, so I'm just gonna have to be like this. I apologize. On page 27 of the proposed budget, are we specifically talking about operating supplies? Is that, or am I looking at the wrong line?
Yes, operating supplies.
Okay. So, Ms. Willetts, the expenses that you listed would fall under those operating.
Right, and we also have the, for this fiscal year, the proposed operating supplies was 124,400. And we have that all accounted for in FY26 of what would make up that number and what,
I'm sorry, what did you say it was proposed for in FY25?
FY25, it was
124.
107,935. And then in FY26, it's 124,400.
Okay, so just to clarify, so when we're looking at this, we should not look at projected at all in the sense that the intent is to spend what is in that FY25 budget.
Yeah, for what's needed, yes. That estimated, where's it? What's the column called?
Well, then what is the point of having a projected expense for April to June?
That's the problem. It says it in the code that it's required to be there, and Commissioner Turnquist did bring it to our attention last year during the budget, that line was not in the budget last year. We've never done it before.
Yeah.
We've never put forecasting in the budget before. But since you brought it to our attention, we did add it this year. It is a long, arduous process to come up with the forecasting that unfortunately it takes a lot of time, and we just didn't have the time to sit there and come up with what exactly each line item was going to be. So
Yeah, I understand.
we had to do it kind of quickly.
Yeah, I
and-
understand that.
Yes.
But a lot of, I didn't total as you were listing them. I'm sorry, I didn't total them in my head. So, but we know at the beginning of this meeting that those expenses were made.
Right.
So that would be helpful information to have, that, when we're looking at it from a non-accounting lens, that we know that there's more, especially the water fund, if that's
Right.
the part that we're really.
Money's being spent every day.
Can you turn on your microphone?
Money's being spent every day. We'd be constantly updating before meetings. I mean, the year's not over. It should be understood that money's being spent.
So just out of curiosity, how much money was that total that you listed off?
Just the two off the top of my head, that's 60, the manhole lifter, the line locator, 6,500. Do you remember what else we've done last week, Jared? How much?
So
Yeah.
we're up to 9,500.
That's just last week, that off the top of my head.
Okay. Microphone, otherwise people at home can't hear you. So if we can rattle that off the top of our head, okay, that's still something that's pertinent to the water discussion. So I understand it's ever changing. I understand that, but we're trying to do our best. And it just would have, maybe it needs to be presented differently as a budget summary. We anticipate to spend everything in FY25 budget, so that when we look at projected. So are these items that just popped up out of nowhere?
No, they're actually in the budget.
Okay, so why is that not in the projected then?
Because it was done just last week. So the projected is only through March 25th. Right?
No.
Look, I did the best to average out and guesstimate. I spent a lot of time and effort is spent on the actual fiscal year 26 budget numbers, what we expect to spend in 26. The fiscal year 25 budget's already done and approved. So we may or may not hit the full amount. It's been approved to do so. And again, it's a rough estimate for those forecasted numbers because we don't have the hours. It would have taken weeks to go through
I'm not talking about the hours.
what exactly went into the budget when we made it for 25, look at the actual, see exactly what's been spent so far, and then figure out exactly what the difference is every single line. So it's a best guess estimate, not knowing every day what Jared's running into per se, to get that forecasted amount.
I'm going to say,
Wait, wait,
there's always exceptions. There's always going to be emergencies. There's going to be break fix. You can't plan break fix. It's the nature of the beast. But if we go back and what I heard was, well, that particular item was in the budget. Well, if that item's in the budget, that's known. That's not an unknown. You know, break fix when they
Right.
say, hey, I need to replace this valve and it's $10,000. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. You can't predict that in advance. But if it's a budget line item,
That should be in.
and if we just haven't incurred the contract yet, we know it's a contract coming.
Right.
Yeah, I only know those because I actually have that written down from last year's budget and it popped out that those things I just approved last week. I mean, we could have taken the easy way out and just subtracted the numbers and said we were going to spend it all. We did our best to estimate based off the amount of time that we had.
Well, I'm just curious then where the number came from, because $16,060 is pretty. What's that? It's not necessarily a rounded number, so it had to. I guess it doesn't matter. We can go down the weeds, but needless to say, what we're looking at then.
Well, and we can't sustain large line item increases in the water fund. I mean, we just can't go there. You know, when I did forecasting in my federal government position, you know, you can straight line the projection and then you go to your departments and say, are you going to spend anything over like the capital equipment limit? Ours was 5K. So you can project those bigger one-time hits that's not included in the straight line projection. So we should be able to look at the FY25 actual forecast and figure out where we're going to end up within a couple $1,000s or even a $5,000 margin. And just because there's money left over in the line item doesn't mean we should spend it. I mean, that's what people in the federal government did. Oh, we're going to lose $1 million. Let's buy new furniture.
So here's the problem. You have a water, the reason your expenses are going up, you have a water plant that's over 50 years old and it costs more to fix it and repair it than it would to have a new one. You have aging infrastructure that costs more to fix, maintain, and repair. So your costs are going to continue to go up. That's the nature of the beast. And if you want accurate 100% forecasting, then I'm going to be painfully honest, you need to hire another person for the accounting department because there is not enough time to get everything done by your accountant. So this was our first time forecasting. This first time we've done it in the budget. If it wants to stay in the budget, then we can improve next year. But, you know, it's the nature of the beast. The costs are going up. You've got aging infrastructure.
Right.
And
we understand that. And I think, and just this one line item, I can see where we could take the FY25 July to March, add it to the projected of 16,000. We get around 57,000. And it looks like we have a lot left on the table. So if we have line items in the budget that take up another 50,000, that to me doesn't seem like it would be that hard to project.
okay. I'm not
I
going to
mean-
argue. I'm not going to argue forecasting. I just know, let me do it.
I'm not talking about hours and time work.
No, she's not. She's talking about time in here, the amount of
Right.
time, how much overtime she's actually put in these last couple of weeks trying to get everything together. And I understand what you're saying, but if you want to talk about FY26 budget, the requirements in that budget change each year. So if you're going to reduce so you see you have excess in FY25, what we have in FY26 is not completely, but a lot of things are different. It's different equipment that's needed, different operating supplies. Remember, you got a water clarifier coming online as well. So the expenses are different each year on what is needed for that plant. There's some standard things that we buy every year for that water plant.
And the
But-
older the plant gets, the more expensive it's going to get. And we need to be cognizant of that fact because some of these parts are going to stop being made and it's going to be harder to source and harder to do. It's just that when I looked at the 15%, said that the 966 was our revenue. Our break-even point is 925. So it gave it some extra. If we had money from the prior year left over, it bumps that extra. It makes me more comfortable. I don't want to break even and I can't ever go below cost. So I'm looking just to try to find where can I keep it above that line? You know, it's take a penny here, take a penny there.
Well, and there are some options to be looked at because now wait a minute. Wait, let me look at this page.
There are definitely options in where you can move things around and how you account for them. That's just, do we want to go down that path?
We might have to.
Well, that may be.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, 15% still keeps us above the break-even point. Not substantially, but it keeps us above. So I think if we were to go with 15%, which I'm personally in favor of, it's still at this point, we also need to look where else can we save some money at. And, I know people like chemicals and everything. Chemicals cost is going through the roof and it's only getting worse. I mean, there's a huge increase predicted in chemicals. And, so it's, some of that, I would go back to Jimmy and them and say, you're the expert on this. I'm trusting when you said, I know that chemicals are going up. Can I say it's 100% on this one? No, but I count on him being the expert in that. And he says it's 100%. I'm going to take his word for that.
I did want to ask about FEMA. Does the 840 include revenue from FEMA?
Yes, we did not do any decrease on FEMA. We had initially talked about reducing the revenue by 50%, I think 50% or 25%, not knowing if classes were going to come back. We opted not to do that based off the conversations the mayors had with the personnel. And so no, that does include FEMA coming in.
Okay, because I noticed our revenue, at least, and it may be back to the forecast issue, but we were forecasting revenue for FY25 of 853,000. But the budget for 26 is 840,000. Is that just another forecast issue?
Rate increase.
I think it was based off the usage to date when we did the budget. So when she did the budget and then just the additional
so if
third
there was
quarter
no rate increase, the
third quarter
853 instead of 840.
If everything stays the same.
Okay. I mean, that's another 13K.
I think what you can't forget, you are just trying to get back to the break-even line for the day-to-day operations. You're not even taking into consideration the $20 million in upgrades that we need to do, or even I need 178,000 just to do the engineering plans for West Main Street water line, which is a very, very small project. So we're not even taking that into consideration. So that means we're going to push that down the line at least another year just to get the people on West Main Street a decent water line.
Now, I think it's, at least mine in the conversations I've had, is everybody wants to make it above cost. We're talking about the dollar amounts. When we talk about $20 million and the catastrophic failures and having to bring water in and everything, we're going to have to get a loan or a grant for that regardless. We're never going to be able to cover that. I think, is it prudent for us to have money in reserves to cover stuff? Most definitely. And that's why, when I said, okay, there's that $116,000 I thought was going to roll over, is it?
Well, looking at page 6 of our agenda, and I know we were provided this before, I believe, the break-even calculation. So that's not new. So the FY26 draft budget, excluding depreciation, estimated expenses 925,409. Increase needed to break even would be 10.17%. Okay, so but that's assuming the budget goes through as it stands. That's assuming all of the wish list requests go through. That's assuming we move the benefits at the mayor's recommendation. That assumes this whole budget going through, which we haven't even gotten to yet. So if we as a council were to say we want to put it at 15 and we can reevaluate each year, then we have a starting point to say, okay, well, what is not needed to hit the expenses of the water fund for FY26? What are nice to haves versus need to have?
I depend on my staff, but they were instructed at the beginning of the budget process that we did not put any wants in there, that everything is needs. Because we were expecting cuts from both the state and the federal level months ago. So this is a very, very slim budget. So there isn't any wants in there.
Well, then that can go back into, like, if we move benefits back to the way they were, we would make up what, 70, 80,000 or so?
Yeah, around 80K.
Yeah, you can do that, and I'm okay with it, as long as you understand we reacted to a request by one of the commissioners to do best practices, and they wanted to do it on the income side, but not the expenditure side. And that's not best practices in my mind.
It's not. I'm going to put my accounting hat on. It is not best practice not to do that. So it's correct. It is best practice. But I think it was done and mentioned that, hey, this should change, not understanding what that best practice was. And now they're like, oh, that's not what the intent. I think it was, the intention was there to say, hey, we should do best practice, not understanding the impact of doing your books that way.
Well, and I agree with you. And that's something that we had never discussed up until now. And I'm not saying I'm not in favor of best practice. I think we should be in best practice. But if we want to head in that direction, does it need to be done overnight? Can it be we work towards it? Just like having a 90-day reserve is a best practice. It's not legal. It's the ideal. So, but we're not going to do it overnight. Are there certain things that we can phase in, knowing our intent is to go in that direction versus let's correct everything now? And I think the interest that Commissioner Turnquist pointed out wasn't, I understand that it has since been everything's looking good and rectified. But that was a little bit more than just a best practice. So that's what she was seeking clarification on, as far as if this is what needs to be done per accounting. That's more than a best practice. That's the way it's supposed to be done. So yeah, I think best practice, we should have a 90-day reserve. We should have benefits coming out if that is indeed best practice. I think it's a goal to strive for. Do I think it needs to be done by FY26? No, I don't.
Just to give you a couple little figures here that, and here again, some of this is probably my fault, because for the last 2 years, I've been talking about catastrophic failures of the water system. And just to throw some numbers out there, we do not have a plan. The town of Emmitsburg does not have a plan right now. If the water plant would have, say, a storm would come through and take out the whole plant, the 10-inch line coming down the mountain would rupture, and we have no water in town for 2 weeks. So just some of those numbers that we were able to pull together here in the last week, to bring a 5,000-gallon water tanker in, just so people had someplace to come get water. It's $12,000 for a truckload of water to supply every home with a case of drinking water every day. That's 1,000 cases of water every day. That's probably $2,000. So you're talking above salaries. Probably $15,000 to $20,000 a day it will cost us to supply and distribute water if we would have a catastrophic failure here in town, and we have no way to pay for that.
Right.
So, and we need to put a plan together, which we are working very, very hard on.
I mean, she's putting a lot of effort in, just not only that, but disaster recovery, everything. I mean, we're trying to move in that direction to cover that, because you should have a disaster recovery plan.
Well, yeah, and how do we get the water out? Who does that? Where are the places that people could go?
Right.
What do you do?
Where's your staging areas?
Sure. How do we take care of the elderly that can't get out to get their water? All that is something we have to put together, and with that plan is going to come, expenses,
Well,
a lot of manpower, and we need to put that together. And I come to find out after calling around, there's a lot of communities that don't have that. So we're not the only one, but
it's common.
We're going to have it by the end of the year.
Most it's like, I know she's working on it and doing good. Yeah, I know you're working on it and you're asking the right questions and getting it rolling. But in the end, any disaster, it is my belief that we're not going to survive it without grants or loans. Point blank.
Oh, and I agree 100%. But the problem being, you have to show that you can pay those loans back. At least every loan that I ever had, I had to make sure I could pay it back. And if we don't have money coming into the water fund that shows that we can pay that loan back, we're not going to get it.
Right. And I mean,
disaster money, though, you're talking about spending money today. You're not talking about building a new water plant or a new
right.
or whatever.
You're talking about break fix.
When you talk about grants and loans, that's something that's going to get done as we move forward. But the first days or weeks of the disaster,
right,
you need cash. Not going to the bank asking, can I get a loan? Can I get a grant for the government, whatever. But so the disaster money needs to be cash, readily available, ready to check for it.
Right.
So as far as getting that, I mean, it's just too.
And while I deep down believe that Frederick County would be here in a minute to help us do whatever they can do, but not financially.
If they can get the highway.
Right. But we can't depend on the federal government.
That's why it's like,
you don't depend on the federal government for weeks, if not months, to be able to help you with anything.
Well, that's why it's key to me, at least, that you make more than what the cost is, that you have some buffer out there. I think that what we're getting stuck on is how much is that buffer is, and we got to find some way that everybody's comfortable with a number.
I like the 25% reserve amount to be collecting 25% annually. I like that number.
Yeah.
That's a number I had in mind. Obviously the mayor and our staff came up with that as well, but I believe that 25% number, if we take whatever monies we collect from the water consumption annually of 25% and put it into reserve, it doesn't restrict the projects that the staff has, because restriction in my mind would be, as I talked about before, would be for big projects that are planned, scheduled to the best of our abilities, not thinking about a real disaster, but reserve funds would be for, if you needed a new pump station that we did at Creamery Road, you needed a new filter system.
So in addition,
new and upgrades.
So in addition to your 25%, how much additional outside of that 25%, how much additional would you be comfortable with we should have in the water fund? In addition to that 25%.
What do you mean in it?
Okay, so what I said, let's assume if I use 15% and that brings in $966,000, that leaves us what? It's like roughly $241,000 to put in.
Then you go to break even, because if you left it alone at 36%, you just left it alone because of where we're at. I don't know if you can get an ordinance before July, but regardless, if you left it alone, just say 25% goes to that fund, and next year you resolve what you said, I believe, CIP or something like that. I like, but 25% it goes to reserve. Leave everything else alone. That means that there's about 11% going into the operating side. But a lot of the money that's currently being thought about as water and sewer money is money that really could come out of reserve funds as a reserve fund that you would have restricted to upgrades and replacements. So while that wouldn't hinder the projects and the items that the staff needs to purchase or replace or things of that nature, it wouldn't hinder that. And you would wind up with that. You would wind up with both. You'd wind up with your break-even amount roughly, and you'd wind up with an additional 25%, or not additional, but you'd wind up with a 25% reserve fund. And down the road, you look at that and see if it's 25% sufficient, too much, too little, whatever it is.
So if I can clarify, Commissioner Hoover, are you saying that you would be more comfortable with 25%
Reserve,
reserve?
as they actually got here, is what they've got calculated. Break even plus 25% reserve, as they got in each of their, I think, the 25% reserve restricted funds to be for.
But Commissioner Hoover, with all due
Projects.
respect, that does not include all of our revenue in the water fund. It only includes the utility charge itself, not the rest of the revenue.
Which does? What do you mean?
When you say the break even, that's only based on the utility charge alone. It doesn't include the other revenue that comes into the water fund. It doesn't include tap fees or any of the other revenue that's listed.
Well, your tap fees, I think they're already still in the ordinance as restricted, are they not?
No.
The ordinance is kind of contradictory, and that's what we've been working on. The way the ordinance is written, it says it's a connection / capacity fee.
Right.
And it's reserved for maintenance. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it does have specific things that it's reserved for. And as I explained, Commissioner Bowman Pollitt and I talked last week, one of the things that USDA says when they look at your financials and they look at for funding, they do look at all revenue sources. However, they only look at the revenue sources that stay consistent through the life of the grant and loan for that project. So
Which would not be tap fees.
which would not be tap fees and would not be interest unless you're going to consistently get that amount. So what they do look at is your utility charge, your late fees, your maintenance charge. Is it the three of those? I think it's those three that they look at predominantly for funding. Now, if you could guarantee you're going to get 80,000 or 40,000 in tap fees every year for the next 40 years for the life of that project or life of that loan, then they'll take it in consideration. But those are things they look at.
Right. So using the consumption building, the building for the actual consumption utilities, you're calling it, take 25% of that money and put it in reserve. And then there's reserve funds be restricted to, similar to what the tap fees are, because tap fees are intended for increased capacity. So when somebody buys a tap fee down the road, at some point, you're going to need to replace that tap fee if you're going to have new housing or new business or what have you. But if you put that 25% into reserve, restricted by ordinance, and to where it's for upgrades and replacements of systems, the West Main Street water line would be able to come out of reserve funds more so than operating day-to-day maintenance. And then the day-to-day maintenance, a water line repair, break, replace a 10-foot section or something would be operated.
So
That's my mind anyway.
can I ask, because I'm looking at that box on page 7, which is what I'm at the top box on page 7 of our agenda.
Mhm.
Oh, I see you have it.
Yep.
The break even plus 25% reserve. So is that the chart you're referring to?
Well, yes and no. I'm just looking at this top line here. We're just, so the town,
Break even.
so the
plus
staff and their
25%.
mayor have looked at the 20, so all these reserve, where it says the break even or whatever it is with the reserve, their reserve is 25% is what I'm pointing out.
Okay, because
Somewhere in here they had reserve for, I'm sorry, the break even, here it is.
break even here.
Break even was 10.17%.
So this would say it would break even with the 25% reserve calculation built in would bring our estimated expenses to over $1 million.
You'd be 1 point, it looks like 1.142,
Mm.
I believe.
Where are you looking? I'm
Right.
sorry, Commissioner Hoover.
Top of page
Top of
7.
page 6, well, hang on a second. Look at page 6 for a second. And the very first one, estimated revenue based on rate comparison, which is, and the last thing you have is the 36%.
Okay.
That's 1.142. If you've done the 25% reserve and you've done the break even number of 10.17, so call it 11,
Mhm.
and the 25% reserve, you're going to get that revenue. 25% of that would go to reserve. So you would wind up with the revenue that that is currently designated with the current rate plan. You would get that revenue, but again, your reserve fund would be part of that. Where right now you don't have the reserve fund.
So does the,
Understand?
so,
That makes sense?
No, I'm a little confused. I'm sorry.
All right, let me try it again.
Okay.
So on page 6,
I'm good on 6.
so that just gives us different rates, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 36%, which is the days as the day.
Right.
That is your current, as of July 1, that will be the rate unless something is done at the next meeting
Right.
correct?
or whenever, but before July. So your 36% is going to earn you a projection of $1.142 million.
Mhm. Okay.
So if you look down to the next column, the break even calculation tells me the break even to your budget is 10.17%.
Mhm.
So rounded up to 11%.
Mhm.
And if I
Okay.
ask for the 25% as reserve
Mhm.
equals 36, that gives you your 1.142. Right where we're already earmarked to be, unless a motion is made at a future meeting.
Okay.
It's just that you would wind up with 25% restricted money. But again, like I say, a lot of the projects you've talked about in the budget are legitimate restricted fund money.
Right. Okay.
So we would, in my way of looking at it, we get 2 for 1. I mean, or whatever you call it, we get a double deal because you get your fund, your restricted fund that I've talked about in the past, but we get that restricted fund and you got your break even operating cost. But for now, from July 1 forward, you would continue to continue to establish a restricted fund. And of course, then another thing to do would be if you're doing it in the water, then why would you not do it in the sewer? I think the sewer is safe to go another year or two, because I do know that there's, well, I can't say I do know, but based on what I've been told or what I've seen here, the sewer currently has a little bit of surplus in it or whatever you're going to call it, to where a year or two is not going to impact us if we don't do a reserve fund in that immediately, but trying to get through what we're trying to stumble through the last 3 meetings now is
Okay.
get us to where we're
All right. So this is
Getting
essentially, okay. So in April, we were looking at 849 in expenses in the water fund. Last week, we were looking at what? 925?
925, I guess. it
And
was.
now we are looking at over $1 million if we were to go with the 25% reserve.
But your 25% is reserved funds
I understand
for
that.
future projects, the water plant. so
It's-
the-
I understand, but it's still estimated expenses, right? So we,
No.
Well,
Your
that's what it's-
your restricted fund would not necessarily be projected to be spent every year.
well, then why does it say estimated expenses right here
Well,
on page 7?
Well, I'm using the numbers from all over the place here, but
I mean, I'm assuming the reserve is part of the expenses
don't-
because we have to charge for it. Yeah, right here,
which one are you looking at?
page 7.
1,040,000
Right.
or which one am I looking at?
You see?
Page 7, yeah.
Page 7. So
Right. Was it 142? Only 142.
So now we're looking at adding in a 25% reserve on top of the, assuming the budget is passed as is, and then adding a 25% reserve calculation factored into that.
I'm not sure what rate is in the current FY26 proposed budget.
0.
0. Okay.
Yes.
So okay. wait a minute.
So on page 7, you want to actually look at the lower chart. Because,
Okay.
because the upper chart is based off the FY24
Okay.
audit.
All right, so let's take
So if you look at the bottom chart, that has to do with this current budget.
let's look at the bottom chart. Okay. So many charts. Okay.
While you're looking at that, can I ask, on page 32, our water fund cash reserves, it says 2.2 million in FY26. How much of that is ARPA? And how much is true cash reserves?
How much of it is actually ARPA? Currently. Oh, wait, I have it right here.
If you're asking for fiscal year 26, that's just a roll forward. But whatever's in there is the 2 million that normally is.
Right, I think ARPA, we have, let me I gotta pull my spreadsheet up. I have it because I just did the annual report last week.
Okay, so while you pull that up, looking at the second chart, break even with the 25% reserve calculation based on the FY26 draft budget operating expenses, we would need 37%, almost 38% increase in water. Which would need a change in ordinance anyway, because it would be higher. So what I would be interested in is, I know we had talked about this, Miss Willetts too, is we're factoring in a 90-day reserve. We know that USDA said, you know, they're looking for at least a 25-day reserve. 90-day would be ideal, right? It's always 25%. Not 25 day,
Which is 90 day.
90 day.
Answer your question, Commissioner Turnquist, about 2.1 million of that is ARPA, roughly. Is that right?
No,
That's fine.
I mean, technically you have to look at the fiscal year 25.
So we have about 100,000 then in our cash reserve. Is that what the difference is?
We'll have to figure
I need to
figure
bring a
exactly that
calculator.
number out. When I filed the annual report on April 30th, we had 2.1 million left to spend in ARPA. That chart was done, when we do that, mid-April. So there's probably a little bit less.
So our reserve is not currently at 0. It's somewhere around 100,000, depending on the ARPA.
Depending on the ARPA, we can get a more concrete number this week.
Okay, and I just want to, for information purposes, make sure everybody understands when we talk about this 90-day reserve, how it works. It's not mandated, but if you don't have that reserve, it's the difference between grants and loans. Your chance of getting a grant without it are near nil, you know, without somebody really going to bat for you. You may get a loan, but then that costs you even more money.
No, they actually require 25% for both.
Yeah.
USDA does.
Yeah.
The other funding agencies have different rules, but USDA requires 25% to be considered for grants and loans.
Can't get a
Because they want to
loan.
make sure you can pay your loan back.
Right. Yeah. That's why I said, you know, not having it is, it's, they just don't give you the money.
Right, credit score.
Print it out somewhere.
Well, if we, I mean, just looking quickly at these calculations, if we do 15%, it's 126,000. Right? If we move the benefits, that's 80,000. And then we only need to find 25,000 to create the 90-day reserve. And that's if we don't even factor in the restricted cash, the estimated 42K that's, I mean, that's not making any cuts. 15%, 126,000, 80,000 for benefits. We need another 25,000, and we're estimated to have 42K left over at the end of FY26 in the water fund. So we've met the 90-day reserve just with those two things.
And I'm okay with that as long as I don't hear another word about best accounting practices. I'm perfectly
Mayor Davis.
perfectly fine with that. Perfectly
With all
fine.
due respect, there's a huge difference between legal and best practices.
No, ma'am. When you want to take expenses, don't want to take your expenses out of a fund, but you want to put income in there. That's not
Okay,
best
well-
because you're not showing our people our true expenses for the water fund. And I don't have a problem with them. I do not have a problem. I just don't want to hear any more about best accounting practices then.
If we leave the 80K in the water fund and the additional benefits with, which I think total around 30,000 that were added to the sewer fund, then that could very well impact either COLA and or merit increases, because you can't raise water rates by 37% and give large increases. It doesn't work that way.
You most certainly can if you want to take care of your employees and keep your employees. If you all want to come in here and volunteer your time to do the work, you're right, you don't have to.
I believe
But if you want to keep your employees, you have to take care of your employees. We're nothing. This whole group here is nothing without those guys back there.
I agree 100%, but we have to phase this in for the water fund. We just can't add $80,000 in expenses.
So here's the thing. The code says merit increases are based on funds available. So if we have to increase rates in the water fund to cover our operating expenses, then essentially we're increasing rates to cover for the benefits, COLA, and merit as well, because that all goes into operating expenses. So the code says funds available. So if we are going to raise the rates to cover that and 80,000 of benefits, or it's going from the general fund over to the water fund, then do we reduce the property tax? Do we lower property taxes?
No, you can't afford to do that because as you can see, we don't have a surplus anywhere. And that's what I keep saying. We're playing checkers by just moving around. We're moving everything around now to make the water fund look good. And in 3 years, we're going to be going, oh, the general fund's now out of money, or the sewer fund's out of money now. Well, because we took too much out of that. And that's all we're doing. We're just playing a game right now that's not going to work out. It's almost like, trying to pay a little bit on this loan, a little bit here, and eventually the creditors are going to catch up with you when you don't make all your payments.
So,
And that's a problem. We just don't have enough money. We're not taking in enough money to run the town.
So let me just clarify something though. Based on the constant yield, assuming that's going to get approved here tonight, you essentially are reducing your tax rate because the constant yield is going to give you in FY26 the same amount of money you got in FY25. So there's no.
Right. So with inflation, you're losing money. I always tell
Right,
people,
because
if you
if-
keep constant, you lose
if you
money
keep it at
year after year
130
because you
if keep it
don't
at
account for
35 cents
inflation.
100. Now you're going to be.
So let me- maybe the question I should ask is, if we're moving 80,000 that we used to charge to the general fund and we're now charging to the water, sewer, wherever it's going, where does that extra 80,000 go then? Where was it allocated in the budget? Because suddenly you have 80,000 more to play with. Because I think we look at our general fund.
80,000 from the operating.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's.
So
So in reality, so last year's budget, it was 14,000 in benefit to the water fund for health and pension. This year, it's budgeted at 75,000. So it would have gone up regardless anyway, because
Right.
health insurance goes up, the state requirement for your contributions to pension,
CPI.
they're going to go up anyway. So there's going to be an increase anyway. It's not 80,000. And then it's basically based off the percentage of where everybody spent their time. So the benefits got spread out through the entire department in the general fund, as well as the water and sewer, depending on where time was spent. That's how, that's where that would be allocated across. No one department in particular.
Commissioner, I had actually 3 people come up to me and said, please don't cut your general fund short where you have to raise property tax, because that's something I can't control as a homeowner. They can't control what their property is worth and what's assessed at. They said, I can control my water use, but I can't control my property value. And I never even thought of that. And that was a very valid point.
Right. And I'm not saying raise property taxes. I said lower them. But if we're now taking line items, so all of the operating expenses that we're proposing in this budget will be picked up by the residents with water rate increases in order to pay for it. So either way, the residents are going to be picking up the bill in order to meet our operating expenses. Correct?
Yes, and that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
All we're doing is moving stuff around. That's why, that's why I never said anything about the interest payment, because I was okay with with less money coming out of the water fund until you put our feet to the fire and, make accusations. I go, okay, we got to fix this then.
Mr. Adams,
Which
can you please clarify the difference between best practice and the interest?
I know I need to be.
Well, I
don't-
know, I think we
best-
do
but no,
because
best practice is what we were told, and that's what I want to do. But and I told you I'm okay with it as long as I don't hear any more about it.
can you please clarify the difference between those two?
So there's a provision of the local government article that does refer to interest derived from a fund should go back to the fund from which it originated. It says that. There is no state law provision with respect to benefit allocation. That is a generally accepted accounting principle that I think, Mr. Hagan, you would agree. And well, I'll defer to Ms. Powell's experience, but mine as well. That's typically how we see things done. So that is the difference. That state law provision.
So state law dictated the interest, but not the benefits.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. So best practice and what's legal by law are two very different things. That's what we're saying. Okay, so, just wanted
You
to,
said state law said it should. Is it should or shall?
On interest. So I'll give you an example that I gave this Turnquist. I said, as a CMA, if I saw that interest wasn't allocated back to the fund, I couldn't sign the financials. That would put my license at risk.
To answer your question, Commissioner, it is a shall.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, I know you're tired of hearing about it, but it will come back to the board to vote on the new interest policy, because the policy that you presented said at some point during the year, the water fund was going to get 0% interest.
Well, I
That
will.
would assume we're running in the red, which is unlikely to happen.
I do just want to address the policy issue. Ultimately, all financial policies of the town are reflected in its budget. And in the charter, it says that as part of the budget, the mayor will present the budget along with the proposed policies for the town for that year. And that ultimately is what gets voted on by the board or not. And if the board can't reach a consensus on the budget, of course, then the budget as presented will stand. So that in that sense, that is how policies are voted on rather than as a separate, we're approving that. Just want to.
Then we need to address, so you're saying we need to address the interest income policy before approving the budget.
Well, it's part of the budget.
So we have to address it before.
Approving the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the budget, and how we allocate the budget is what we vote on.
We'll
Correct.
have to Put that on.
So if we want to change anything that the mayor presented, we have to come to a consensus and agree on it. It's just doesn't come out of thin air.
That's right.
And the budget does have Commissioner Turnquist's recommendation in it. It is presented that way.
Right. Well, so, but I'm saying we need to discuss it.
As-
Your recommendation.
As part of the budget approval, if you want to change how interest is allocated, or if you want to change how benefits, et cetera, are allocated, that's something you need to do as part of the budget approval process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the original. I mean, it's hard to talk about any of these in isolation because they all kind of overlap. So I feel like we're kind of hitting a lot of agenda items at once. But originally, Commissioner Hagan, you said 15%, bring it down to a CPI or something that would force council to come back and reevaluate. What's being presented here is new as far as 25% reserve calculation built in, which would increase even from what we were presented last week. So we can go back and forth and say, do we even want to consider the 25% reserve calculation, which is brand new as of tonight? Or do we say, let's make a decision on the rate? And then if we want to work towards a 25% reserve calculation, then we can have a year where we're working it. I don't think that between the last three meetings and the different proposals, I don't see how we can go forward with a 25% reserve calculation factored in when that was never part of our ordinance. We'd have to go up 37.71%.
Just
So is that what you're proposing? That we do almost a 38% water increase? Because that's
I
what
don't
that
think based
is.
on the documents we got here, anything's really being proposed. The council requested numbers of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25%. And that's what we received.
Oh, I
So there's
know,
no
but
proposed- This is not a proposal.
I know, but you said that you were in favor of the
Well,
25% reserve and
I-
break even.
I've said tonight, as well as I said many other nights, I would like for us to make sure we have a reserve fund. And I see that in here tonight as a recommend, as a number in here, and I think that's a good point. So, and that's the point that I was making earlier. Mr.
Okay.
Hagan had brought up about a 15%. He brought that up last meeting. He's brought it up maybe brought it up the last 2 meetings or so. So, and we talked about the break even mark, and I said, well, if you do the break even and you do the 25%, you're going to be right at that where we're at today at 36%. And
Correct.
and it appears that we're really not going to be able to make a consensus because we've been here 3 different meetings and we haven't yet.
Well, I
So
mean,
we're kind of stuck with a 36%, whether we want to be or not.
but wait a minute. This is the first night that we've talked about adding in a 25% reserve calculation. It's the first night.
Well, then deal with Commissioner Hagan's piece of is 15% of acceptable number by everybody or not, and
I'm in favor of the 15%. What would you like? Other opinions?
I'm 15 still.
Yeah, I think the reserve fund is a great idea and should be worked for. I just think it's too big of a number right now.
Okay.
I
so-
think you can't, you got to be above break even. The discussion for me is how big is that number going to be? And I think between doing 15% and looking at where we're allocating things, we can make enough that it's not break even, that we have some fluff, not fluff, but we have money for break fix and stuff like that. And we have to have something for break fix, and that gets us there without going higher. I'm trying to get an increase that keeps it to a minimum. We have to increase. We can't not increase. My objective is, what's the increase we can get that we're not in debt and we have some money for break fix? That's why I go with that 15%. That gets us above that. And then as we look at the larger budget and allocate funds, I think that gives us enough.
So if we
And we can
three-
start working on this 25. A reserve fund is
Yeah.
an incredibly great idea. I don't want to shoot that down. I just think it's too much
Right.
for the economy the way it is right now.
So that's three who would like to see a 15%.
I'll accept the 15. Gets us moved along, I'll definitely accept it.
Right. Is that the direction we want to give to staff?
I like the 25% reserve too, that he presented on the townhouse.
I like the idea of it too. I just don't like it as of right now on May 12th.
So we will be applying to USDA. Actually, we just submit the application and they have to review it, but we will be applying to USDA for the North Seaton Avenue Waterline Project. I guess that'll be the telltale when we submit everything to them.
I think, yeah, it will be. It will be. And here's the thing, even if we do the 36%, we're still not at a 90-day reserve. So. Oh, wait a minute.
No,
Plus,
we'd be
this
short
is-
at 36%. We'd be short on the 90-day reserve.
Right.
Barely, but it's minimally short.
So it goes back to USDA looking at a variety of factors and looking at we're moving in the right direction. And I think that's what we are trying to do in a realistic paced way without anyways. So do we want to give direction for 15%? Is that what we'd like to say?
Yes.
Is that?
Was there also the CPI portion or inflation portion that's supposed to go along with that, or just the straight 15%?
I think at following years is now, what is it after the 36%? We said 5 years, and
3%.
then it goes to 5% per
I thought it
year.
was three.
3. I think it's that you got to pick whether that's CPI or the inflation rate. You need something in there. You can't just let the budget go and never have an increase.
So which one would you prefer?
I'd prefer CPI.
All right, so we would like to give direction to see 15% for the following year and then CPI after that if nothing else happens, because we want to put
Right.
in there that it needs to be reviewed yearly, and that's going to force everyone to come back instead of just,
You need to look at whether it be a March or April CPI so that.
Right, yeah.
I
so
think
the
it should
budget
be
can
like,
done.
It's typically
Like
you would
January,
go with the April 15th CPI number.
That's a good number.
Or I mean, you could pick anytime. A lot of time people pick just
Oh,
tax
okay.
day.
They just need
As
enough
as
time.
we
in
talked
advance.
Yeah.
last week, this is too rushed, as you guys have obviously noticed. So
Mhm.
waiting till April 15th to then decide your water rates to prepare
You
a
could
budget.
you could go January 1st.
So I will throw this out there. Your sewer rates go up 3% every year.
Yeah.
That's the way it's written in the code. I don't know if you want your water rates to match what your sewer rates do.
See, my concern is inflation is going to start getting higher than that. And I don't want that eating into the number. I want it tied. So if costs are going up, we're matching that.
Do you know what the CPI is?
CPI, we're going to be below 3%, or we can't, obviously we don't have a crystal ball.
It's gonna be pretty close
Okay,
in today's standard anyway.
okay.
But I think Commissioner Hagan's right. I mean, 10 years from now,
It might be different.
it might be
All right,
very different,
so we can say
plus or
CPI.
minus.
So currently it's 2.3%
Mhm.
is the
Oh.
CPI.
And I think that's been a pretty standard for a decade or two at least. To be pretty much in that ballpark.
Oh, 3. How about, can we say something like 3% unless CPI is over 3%.
CPI or
You-
3%, whichever is greater.
Which, yeah, I mean, you can tie it to, like I said, the prime, the LIBOR, the CPI. The object is to not leave it stagnant.
Yeah, I don't want to see it go below 3, but also we wanted to read that.
So if you only go below 3, then it kind of, the Commissioner Turnbull just said, so 3% or CPI, whichever is greater,
Right, yeah, that's
Correct.
fine.
Yes.
which will give, for the most part, will give staff sewer and water the same rate, 3%. Probably for the foreseeable future.
But we would want to put in there, does it need to be added that? And, it will be,
Reviewed yearly, annually.
unless the commissioners decide to increase it, it will be the 3% or CPI, whatever is greater.
Right.
That way there's in the ordinance, the flexibility to,
You'd still have to do a new ordinance
right.
if you
Yeah.
change the rate, yeah.
Right. But if we deadlock or can't do anything, it doesn't stay the same. It still raises with inflation.
Okay.
And, I'm just, it sat there for years and years and years because it's a rough issue to get consensus on. By taking it out of our hand, if we don't do anything, it still goes up.
Okay.
Just so you understand, there will be no funding then for any infrastructure upgrades of a failing water fund or water infrastructure. So there won't be anything there. So just a reminder.
Well,
And I'm good with that. I'm good with that if that's what you all
we still
want, so.
have money. I mean, we currently have money in our cash reserves. And if we make targeted reductions, we can more than meet the 90-day reserve.
But we're still not going anywhere after our $20 million in upgrades that are desperately needed. That's all.
Can I ask an additional point of direction and clarification? When would the council like the issue to be reviewed each year?
No later than March.
Yeah, it's got to be March at the latest.
The decision needs to be made by March.
Yeah. So I'd say set it on a January agenda with a decision no later than March.
Like the March meeting, so like.
Right, so we start the review in January. If we make it before in January with everything, it's fine, we move in, but set the deadline, the decision has to be made by March.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
I mean, it's really up to you, but yes, that,
I mean, does that, if the decision is made by March, should be time for planning?
well, actually, I think that's more of a, if staff had a water rate by March, would that be sufficient for planning purposes?
Yes, because we start budget talks in March.
Okay, then that
It would be, yeah, that would work.
seems like it would work.
Do we have to change the ordinance if we are in effect reducing the rate?
Yes.
Do we have to
You-
have a public hearing? I may have said the wrong thing.
Uh,
Is a public hearing required to change the ordinance if we're in fact reducing it?
I believe it applies for any change. I could be wrong, but I think it's change.
Yeah, it's just change.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it's just
No
increases.
matter which
So we're
direction
gonna
you
have to
go.
schedule a public hearing.
If,
Which,
before you actually change it, then yes. Obviously, you've been talking about it. You can just talk about it without having the full on public hearing. But yes, my belief is change is the operative word. It could be increase, I could be wrong, but that's just my,
And I think it's regardless, it's just good form to let the public
Yeah.
speak out about it.
certainly.
The June agenda.
Okay.
Will that give you enough time?
Has to be June. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have
It-
10
it'll
10
have to be
days. It
before.
has to be advertised no less than 10 days, no more than 30 days.
it'll have to be June. And yeah,
Are we talking about this year? Are we talking about future years?
This year.
Okay, yes.
yeah, this year.
Then yes.
Thank you.
There, scratch one off the list. Should we go for an easy one? Or, I'm sorry, was that enough direction provided. Okay. For consideration approval of resolution 25-02 adopting the constant yield tax rate for FY26.
You know, I'm in favor of adopting it as is. I just need to state you do lose money with a constant yield. So take that into consideration. I mean, I'm fine with it personally, but I think that's a point that every commissioner needs to be aware of, that constant rate does lose money.
Any other discussion, comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept resolution levy of taxes by the town of Emmitsburg for the fiscal year of July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, resolution number 25-02, constant yield rate.
Thank you.
And
Is there?
seconded.
Thank you. Any further comment or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All against? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Scratch something else off the list. All right. Moving down to discussion of benefit accounting policy. Oh, okay.
Okay, so since I brought that up, I'll start off with it. So the question became of the benefits putting over to the department it's charged to, which is 100% best practice. It's a huge change. You're not required to do it in any sense. My bigger question, and staff, tell me if you don't have it, because I'm concerned how we allocate, not that we're allocating it there, but what are the ground rules to say this gets charged here and what gets charged there? You know, if somebody's cutting the grass at the water plant and they're a parks employee, to me, that's still parks. They shouldn't be charged, their time shouldn't be charged to the plant. So I don't know, what are the guidelines for when they're charged to individual funds?
So water guys, sewer guys mow water property and sewer property. Parks guys mows the parks and streets. So water staff takes care of all the water property. Same with the sewer property, and then parks take care of.
So
or streets, and public works takes care of everything else, your streets
okay,
and your parks.
so I may be misunderstanding, because what I thought happened was we were allocating hours of people in the past that weren't in the water fund, and they were helping the water department out, and their time and benefits were being charged. That what you just said sounds like that's not the case. We were just not putting the correct benefits for the people that were in that department charged into the department.
So the public works employees that say they work on a water line break,
Yeah,
they do charge their time to
Right.
water because
they're working on that.
They're
Yeah, it's an
working
all
on the
hands on
water.
deck.
if there's sewer, they charge it to sewer.
Right.
So the way salaries are allocated is based off of where the time is spent and where the time has been spent so far in FY25. Just pulling numbers because I don't have them in front of me, but
Right.
say for Jared, your water and sewer superintendent, he spends 30% of the time in water and 70% of the time in sewer, just pulling numbers out. So
Right.
then 30% of his time is put to water, and then 30% of his benefits were put to water. The other 70% then were put
Right.
to sewer. And that's done for each employee based off of where time is spent, based off of their time sheets. And now a new online time card system we have, it's easily calculated where the percentage of time is.
Right.
So that's how salaries and benefits are
But
allocated.
the benefits, since we've made this, I don't remember the number, but it's the big switch that conform with best practices. So in the past, we weren't charging somebody that was, in your case, at water and sewer 70% of the time. The water and sewer didn't get that 70%.
So the way that So no, so the salaries were still allocated based off of time we've spent.
Okay.
So for Jared, for example, his salary still would have been 30% water, 70% sewer. His home department was sewer, so all his benefits went to sewer.
Okay.
Currently, before this allocation changed, you only had one water and sewer person, home department and water. The remaining four, including your superintendent and your lead operator, were all coming out of sewer.
Okay. That makes sense. I appreciate that.
Sure. Yep.
So that's, but-
So, yeah, in the past, like she said, just to reiterate, all the benefits were from
their
their
home department.
So then it would just be the percentage worked, like salary would also be the percentage of their benefits
Right.
coming from the water or sewer fund, depending,
Yeah.
or whatever, wherever it's going to be charged. Which then I would imagine could potentially hit other departments too, right? Because if then
It flows if
Right.
you do that
Right, flows
everywhere.
everywhere is
You can certainly say everything's charged, benefits, vacation time is all accrued to a home department. It's perfectly allowable. Is it best practice? No, but it is perfectly allowable. And I can tell you nearly healthcare facilities, since that's what I do, does it that way. So, that's a decision that we have to make. I mean, if we're getting, we're deep in the weeds. So once you open this door, realize you are going deep into the weeds, because then you really need to go back and justify every line and understand, like in my case where I said, I didn't understand how that allocation of time, was it somebody that's not in water and sewer that had to go there because there was a break and we're charging it, as opposed to, hey, didn't have anything to do and I could have them do something over there rather than sit around and we're charging it. Two completely different things in my book and everything. But if we're charging it where they're physically working, the decision has to be made is, do we want to keep it overhead in one department? Do we want to allocate it by time out there? The other, once we go down this road, vacation time also has to start being allocated that way, which is another sticky wicket. I mean, I'm would be in favor of keeping it in a home department for that type of thing, and let's look at it. Or if people feel, no, we have to go to best practice, we have to go to best practice now, we phase it in. We say, hey, we're going to do 30% this year, the next 30% that year, and phase it in. It's a shock to the system.
I agree.
I'm
Sorry,
not
go ahead.
sure what I just heard there. If you have a new payroll system that employees are putting in their time, and as he or she puts in their time, it automatically allocates. or
No,
Not, okay.
no, we use that it's easier instead of hand going through time
Okay.
sheets and calculating where time was spent, or the older system. We just use paper time sheets. So you had to go
Gotcha.
back and manually look at it. This is a new system. It does the percentages for us of where time's spent,
Or where time is spent.
where time is
but
spent. It
not-
doesn't
but not
allocate for
benefits.
us, no.
Okay, because last year we confirmed which departments was the home department for some employees.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was our decision then, and we agreed upon then. The home department would be the benefits department for each employee. That's where he or she would,
Right.
all his or her benefits would come from. the
Right.
Home department, and their physically work hours would be their hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was what we decided
Right.
last year,
Right,
home department.
right.
So
Any,
So is what I'm hearing is people want to keep it to the home department.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Hoover.
if I'm hearing correctly, then I think from what staff is doing, it makes it easier that way, leaving the benefits in the home department.
It really doesn't affect I mean, it doesn't make it any easier or any harder as far as the allocations are concerned. It was just easier to come up with the percentages, which we need the percentages to allocate salary anyway. So the same amount of same percentage you had for your salaries was the same percentage you had for your benefits. So, I mean, for that, in that regard, it doesn't make a difference for us.
It doesn't matter. If it's not a management nightmare for either way, then it doesn't matter. To me, it don't matter. So
Okay. So I would like, my perspective is, I'm not denying it's best practice. It's something that came up last meeting. We hadn't talked about that. So that was going to be another line item of expenses on the water fund. So I'm in favor of leaving them in the home department for now, but coming back to this discussion to determine if this council wants to move in the best practice of looking at, doing that percentage of the benefits. Not that I'm putting it off. I just think we talked about there's a lot of change right at the end. And a lot of the change are expense items that are going to hit the water fund. So why rush it? Can we say we're going to pause, but we're going to come back to this after budget and decide, do we want to continue to keep it in the home department? Or do we look at a phase-in approach? Or do we do it as a rip off the Band-Aid or forget about it?
I think we should keep it in the home department.
Home department?
I'm for home department for right now. Keep it the same as it is now.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Turnquist, did we hear from you? I'm sorry.
I agree. Keep it in the home department for now and then revisit it
Okay.
and maybe look at a phased-in approach.
Okay. As far as looking at the phased-in approach, I can't imagine that's something we want to see before the end of June. That would be something we
No,
look at
next budget year.
afterwards, but something that needs to come back to for further discussion. Okay. So consensus is to keep it in home department for now, knowing we will come back to have further discussion. Okay. Number 4. For consideration, approval of ordinance 25-10, Town of Emmonsburg salary chart for FY26. Let's find it. Okay, so the salary chart that we have on page 9, what that's showing is the proposed salary range from minimum to maximum, which would take into account the 3% COLA that is recommended by the mayor, and also the merit. I would assume that includes the merit increases as well, both of those in the same chart.
No, it's just actually just the COLA,
Just
just
the
in your
COLA.
salary chart. Yes.
So where do we,
the merit increase does not increase the top of the scale. Only the COLA does. So the merit doesn't create an increase in the scale.
I thought it did.
Mm-mm.
No?
The COLA does.
Yeah.
The COLA makes the scale 3% higher in this case. But your merit, you're somewhere between, your minimum and your maximum, depending where you are as an employee.
So this is probably a dumb question. Is there ever a situation where they're going to go over the maximum then in this proposed range?
The salary chart says no.
Yeah, so here's my concern along that. In my business dealings, it's standard when somebody's at the maximum, you can't go above that, to give them a bonus as the equivalent. It's the one-time bonus rather than the pay. I don't want to see somebody said, oh, well, they're making so much, but inflation goes up. And we're saying, well, you can never get a pay raise. To me, COLA's meant to keep you with inflation. So it's, I think I would also like to address what happens if somebody's at the maximum. What do we do?
There's a couple, I mean, what we've done in the past, and we haven't had to do it since we switched. The old salary system was grades and steps. And you could max out because you get to the end of that grade and you get to
Right.
that end of the step and then you're stuck. What you could look at is changing the grade level of the position to adjust in the salary chart to account for that, depending on what the position is.
How often, if ever, do we go and say, are we competitive in our geographic area for those positions?
We
We
just
did
did that a
A
couple years
salary
ago.
study. It's more two, 3 years ago. Thank you.
Okay.
3 years ago is when we did it last.
So how often do we have a plan to do it? Every 3 years, every 5 years, or it's just when somebody kicks the bell hard enough that you look at it?
Right. I talked to our HR consultant a lot to just make sure that we try to stay competitive. I think the industry standard is kind of like 3 to 5 years doing a salary review. So we're at the 3-year mark now. It's whether or not we did not plan for it in FY26. Maybe it's something we want to look at doing in FY27 going forward, because I do know there are a couple positions that their salaries should be reviewed because they are not consistent with industry standards. Those are the two that were recommended on the salary spreadsheet that you got for additional increase above the COLA and the merit. But yes, it needs to be reviewed again at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's typical 3 or 5 years or what people do on depending on the industry. And I think that's important because all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're there. And even if you're just giving them COLA all of a sudden, but everybody else is offering them 20% more, you're hosing yourself out of good people.
Exactly.
I think I have a question for our attorney. So the merit increases that are greater than 3%. You said that's based on the industry standard. It's higher than 3, you're recommending higher than 3% based on the industry standard for those two positions.
Yes.
Is there something in our code that authorizes us to do that?
Wait, there's more than one position that's higher than 3?
There was 2.
Yeah, there's 2.
It was your planner and your water and sewer superintendent.
Oh,
Yes.
I see.
I mean, what I read in the code is the mayor can do a promotion at any time if the employee assumes new duties and responsibilities. But do we need to adjust our code to account for a different type of increase?
Let me look.
Perfect.
So clarification, approving this salary chart does or does not, this is only approving COLA.
Sorry. Correct.
So at what point
I gotta look at it.
could we talk about the others that are factored into salary increases? When does that come up? Discussion of the budget?
Budget.
Can I,
Yeah, go for it.
well, the salary chart is part of the ordinance that talks about merit increases. But you're right, it does say if money is available. So yes, I agree with you. Sorry.
I don't know what you're agreeing with, but.
That
sounds
if we
good.
approve the salary chart, we could still discuss the merit increases.
I'm
Because
sorry,
there is the
gotcha.
provision in there related to the budget. So never mind, ignore what I said.
It's okay. It's coming across 9 o'clock, so I'm starting to get fuzzy. All right, so how would you like to proceed?
I'll make a motion to accept the ordinance number 25-10, Town of Emmitsburg salary structure fiscal year FY26 for July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026 with a 3% COLA increase.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any against? All right, motion carries 5-0. Last one is for consideration approval of ordinance 25-12, Town of Emmitsburg FY26 budget.
So this is where you will begin your budget talk.
Yes.
Yes.
Since we, some of the decisions are affecting our budget at this point. So are there other discussion? I thought that this was going to be more like we go through line by line, or is this just us asking questions line by line?
You can, yes, you can do
Okay.
that. Yeah, so you have to adopt your budget by ordinance, and that's
Right.
just why that agenda title is written the way that it is.
Okay. All right, so. Does anyone want to start the discussion?
Can I ask a question? So if we decide to change line items, like for instance, we're going to move the benefits, will you then revise the budget and then bring it back to us for approval at the June meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, any adjustments that are made to the budget here, because we have to do the water rates as well.
Right.
The budget comes back to the board in June. The budget just has to be adopted no later than June 27th.
Okay. Does anybody want to dive in, or would you?
I think Commissioner Turnquist had proposed some changes to different lines. Since she's already got some idea of changes, I think, before we start going line by line and looking at anything, since she's already identified some things that I think that's the good place to start.
So do we want to look at the water fund budget? Or how do you feel about the recommendations?
Well, the water budget will change because of the changes we just made.
Correct.
Sorry.
But she has other things in there, like where are we taking a donation from, which funds and everything. I think those are worth discussion.
And I think, yes, we can, do you want to start there? I know we have some guest speakers too, although they're there for clarification. If we have any questions that we'd like them to answer, we'll ask Ms. Willits in case she knows, and if not, we can phone a friend. Sound good? Okay. So one thing that it looks like was proposed in water was some additional projects coming up, I believe. I think that's on page 33. 33. Yeah. So, that's what I'm looking at. Water fund, yes. So Rainbow Lake repairs. Is that the Rainbow Lake Dam that we're repairing right now?
So right now, we had the engineer, the board approved an engineer to inspect the dam and it's the
Mhm.
surrounding area as required by MDE.
Mhm.
And right now the report is on MDE's, or it's going back and forth between the engineer and MDE for what recommendations they are going to have for the repairs that are going to be needed at the dam. There are repairs that are going to be needed. The extent of which we don't know yet. I
Mhm.
know there's some cracks and such that are going to need to be repaired underneath. I don't have the technical term. But so we were estimating, and again, when it comes to your CIP, a lot of it is estimated on what it is going to cost. I don't know the exact cost of the Rainbow Lake repairs. Just reading the initial report, they're not over the top, but there are going to be some significant repairs.
Sure.
So I just put in 50,000 for each
Mhm.
fiscal year, with 25,000 the last fiscal year for it.
Yeah, which you gave me a lot more. You got an A+ on your extended response for that
Sorry.
question. Thank you for that, because I was just wondering, clarifying that it does relate to the
Yes.
recommendations from the dam engineer that came out. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Roof and gutters at water treatment plant.
Yes, it's in very bad shape, the roof up there and the gutter system. As we've said, it's a 50-year-old building. I don't know that that roof has ever been replaced, but it is in extremely bad condition, and it should absolutely be replaced this fiscal year, so we don't get any more leaks or issues on the equipment.
Have we had
inside.
repairs recently on the roof?
Not that I'm aware of. Jared, come sit
Yeah.
up here. The well,
You should
the,
sit closer.
we actually just fixed the roof at one of the well houses.
I'm
that
sorry, can you repeat?
The roof at one of the well houses was just replaced. I believe it was a tree that fell on it. Yes,
Oh, wait, so is that
that's
What-
not on there.
okay,
Yeah.
so roof and gutters at water treatment plant, is that more than one building? Then?
No,
Just one.
that's
building?
just one building.
All right,
Yes.
okay. So the repairs to the main building, we haven't had that. recently.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then security and camera systems. I know I saw the email where you put in a best faith estimate.
The best faith estimate at 50,000, it actually came in at 98,000
Mhm.
for security and camera system at the water plant, which it absolutely needs, being where it's located. So those are your projects for the water plant as far as asset items are considered. And then below that, you have basically just a project schedule and the funding that we currently have.
On page 34.
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, the security and camera systems at water treatment, that's $100,000 water fund. What does that entail as far as, can it be something that's phased in?
I have the estimate here for it, unless I left it on my desk. It's I don't know that it could be phased in because it includes, because of where the plant itself is located. I left it on my desk. It needs a tower up there to have line of sight for any camera system, internet system to work up there. And that tower is what is the most costly.
Yeah, okay.
Left it on my desk.
You don't have to go blow by blow. I'm not gonna make you do that.
Yeah. So that's just an estimate on that one.
Well, I know we had talked about the end of the last budget, Commissioner Hoover, with the upcoming projects, because if we approve all the projects now, then they're approved, right? Is it possible to bring those up individually versus lumping it in with the budget?
it's possible either way for the board you're talking about all the project schedules to,
Right,
now, some of these are in progress. And some
Right.
of these are probably somewhere close to being in progress. I don't know which ones are which.
So the camera system would ultimately have to be approved by the board anyway because of the cost.
right.
So that is not, that's only at estimated time right now. We haven't gone any further.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, but we could make the decision to approve it as part of the budget, or we could bring it up as a different agenda item coming up and talk about it further, because we're still in flux with our water expenses. And maybe this is something that we need to talk about more after we see how the numbers play out. All right, we don't have to make a decision on that. Let's just brainstorming. Commissioner Turnquist, did you have something that you wanted to?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we want to go back, look at targeted reductions to the water fund.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I never said Siri.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Annual calculator, not a calculator. Because if we can make targeted reductions or move expenses to a more appropriate place, then we can maybe find money for the roof and gutters and the security camera, or to put money in reserves. So do we want to look at the handout again? Is anybody interested in reducing any of those expenses? Removing any of those expenses?
I have a question on the donation to VHC. Why out of the water fund? Why, why was that decision?
Because it's their water bill.
Okay, that's what I'm.
So you have a donation in the general fund to the fire department for $6,000.
Mhm.
And then you have your donation in the water and sewer, correct? Yes, for their utility bill.
Okay, so that's the offset of the utility bill. That's what I needed to know.
So what if we increase the donation from the general fund instead?
So you have the activities building.
Yeah, that's
You-
really the only one I'm talking.
You have, okay. And then you have the fire department on Main Street has 2 meters. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just, because then, for the activity, if the activities building put money back into the water fund, but we increase from our general fund donation. And yes, it is like playing chess, but we're putting money, back in. And
you
we
would-
can make that donation higher than it was before.
So you want to give them a cash donation and tell them to pay their bill?
Yeah, why not?
I'm clarifying.
Yes.
That's what you're asking.
Yep.
Because currently the donation, it shows as an expense. So that expense has to be picked up by residents and businesses.
But our cash donation can come from the general fund.
Right.
So
So not really reducing
It's
what
still
we're,
picked up by the residents and businesses.
I know, but it's not going to, but we would be more in line with what other municipalities are doing for that. They have a higher donation to their emergency services.
I believe they're doing a higher donation and paying, many of them, not all of them, also giving gratis to water.
Right, but not
So-
necessarily activities.
For either or, fire and rescue as a whole, activity buildings, and some of them don't have activity building. They have the activity building, or they, like Vision Hose used to be, no activity building, just a building. So,
Right.
but some will do, some of the municipalities within Frederick County and
Mhm,
others within the state are given sewer and water gratis,
mhm.
in addition to a cash donation.
Right.
Which same thing we're doing now.
Yeah.
Many decided to do that. So if we increase our donation, that number varies across the county as well as across the state as to how much or how little you give, but $6,000 is substantially low.
Right. Right.
Given the donations where we stand compared to most other
Correct.
municipalities, not all, but most.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that would be looking at increasing their support too. I lost my paper.
$6,000 number's got to be 30 plus years old.
Yeah.
Used to be 3 to fire and 3 to ambulance. Now they're combined, so it's, but it's a well overdue increase, but whether we subtract sewer and water from it, I'm not sure about. But
I'm not saying for all of just for that one building, just one building. It won't be that big of a difference, but we can increase the donation to cover that and then some so that they could still make out ahead because we do give a very low amount, 6,000 compared to other municipalities. So I'm not suggesting we increase the donation so it's a break even because it's low to begin with. But something that can be considered. Commissioner Turnquist, what page are you referring to as far as?
As far as the donation?
No, as far as the suggestions that you were making.
Oh, the handout that looks like this, the box
Oh.
around it.
she gave us all this.
I know, I'm just trying to find it. I have so many papers.
Make sure I didn't steal yours.
I have, it's here somewhere, right? I'm confident in that. All right. Oh,
Yeah, I don't have it.
anyways. Oh, thank you. Just took a second, said I.
Late.
It is getting late. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should,
Yeah.
personally, I think we should move those donations to the general fund. And then we need to look at the general fund and see if there's room in the budget to increase the donation. Because it's very low. Even if you add the water and sewer charges together with the $6,000 donation, it's very low.
It is low.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, didn't you check and it's like the average in 20 and 30,000 donations for towns in the region?
Yeah, the community's equivalent to our size, yes.
20 to 30,000.
Yeah, I think depending on the municipality, it's anywhere between 15, 20, all the way up to 30, depending on which one you're looking at. Yeah, no one's as low as 6,000.
I mean, I don't see a problem moving it. I just need to make sure we do not decrease support for VHC. They're a
No,
significant
no.
member of our community.
No, it needs to
No,
be
not
increased.
increase at all.
It needs to be increased. I did have a question. No, never mind. Not on that one. I was just looking at page 27, but
So what we're doing, I'm just going down the list that Commissioner Turner said. And chemicals make sense to me on there. What is the big increase in operating supplies? Is that what's driving that big one?
So it went from 107,000, or roughly 108,000 in FY25 to 124,400 FY26. So from one year to the next, it actually only increased. I know what Commissioner Turnquist is saying about the forecasting, but in the budget, as far as the budget's concerned, it's increased by 16,000. Part of that is money for your lines
Okay.
Lines and pipe, apparently I didn't have my mic on. Lines and piping is a big part of it. We had a significant number of leaks this year. So you'll see increase in lines and piping, not only in operating supplies, but repairs and maintenance. That jumped up about $6,000. Expenses at the water plant went up about $2,000. The wells stayed the same. The lab stayed the same. We spend about $25,000 a year on meters and parts, replacing old water meters. We had to add the clarifier to the budget this year since it will be operational by the end of this year.
I thought the meters, according to this, were on hold due to lack of funding.
No, this is just to replace ones that we have, current ones. It's not updating the system.
Oh.
So what's on hold was moving to a more digital kind of thing.
Understood. Thank
Right,
you for
that's
the
on hold.
clarification.
And then we have an entire list of what makes up the 61,000 for the water plant itself. Anywhere from input cards, output cards, to pH probes, to calibration standards, to air filters. Just everything that makes up what they're going to need as far as operating supplies for the water plant.
And what's the new the additional contract expense that we're adding this year?
Under contractual,
Yeah.
let me move up to that.
That's on the bottom of page 26, I believe.
Contractual. So contractual, a big part of that is adding, we had to add MDE PFAS testing that
Okay.
MDE came out with.
Yeah.
So
Help
lead
them
and
out.
copper testing is done on a 3-year cycle.
Right.
And FY26 will be on that cycle. Then the continued support from the contractor on the lead line inventory. Since that's a project that's going to be ongoing for the next 10 years.
Just the question, not related to the number. Do we know what the Mount's doing with the PFAS? If they're intervening, are they doing anything now?
Yeah, they're trying to get funding to build a whole new plant.
Okay.
Because of the PFAS? Okay. All right, so we're due for PFAS testing this year.
PFAS testing is going to be starting this year. It's going to be a yearly thing on the water and sewer side.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, by yearly? I mean, because
It's going to be ongoing.
Yeah.
Ongoing. Yeah. it's
so
gonna be
instead of
ongoing.
you said before.
So the
3
lead and
years-
I'm sorry, sometimes I talk too fast. The lead and copper testing is 3-year cycle.
Oh,
This is our current year. FY26 is going to be our current year. MDE added a requirement for PFAS testing quarterly. And I think that's going to be here to stay.
oh, instead of yearly?
We didn't have to do it at all.
We didn't have to do it at all.
Yeah. Once,
Understood.
once they find it, they.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
One of the other added expenses is also with the water clarifier going online as well.
Okay.
Well, assuming we need all of that money, let's just say we need it all and not reduce those line items. With the 15% increase, it's 126,000 in revenue. 13,000 if we move the donation for Vigilant Hose and the activities building to the general fund.
You can't really do that because you show the expense. You show the water
They
expense
would
in the
pay
water fund.
bill and we'd increase
So
the
you-
donation.
Okay, so you would still see, so that line item will still, okay, never mind. Go
And
ahead.
then if we transfer roughly 75,000 in benefits back to the original departments, it would give us additional revenue of 314,000, which exceeds our 90-day reserve
Does the,
without cutting anything else.
My understanding was we were only going to charge the activities building for water. We were going to continue. So that wouldn't be the full 12,960 that gets moved to the general fund, whatever the activities building was.
right.
I have that number somewhere.
It's not anywhere near 12,000.
Mm-mm.
I think it's,
Is it like 3?
I think so, closer to 3 is what was estimated.
Right.
3,600.
which could
in
fluctuate.
water and 3,800 in sewer for the activities building.
So we wouldn't, since it could fluctuate, we don't want, we would have, donation would have to cover that and more. We don't want to put them in.
But you would still meet the reserve even if you just did the activities building.
Does the, Ms. Willits, the salaries and wages on page 26 for water include the COLA and the merit?
Yes.
Okay.
Good question, because I know we're not turning water off for delinquent payments. Is that impacting because our bad debt number jumped too? Are we expecting that, or we're writing it off, or what was the jump in the bad debt?
No, bad debt has nothing to do with that. That's actually under the miscellaneous income is where you'll see the impact of that. The reason for that bad debt is that I noticed in our CUSI system, we have several accounts with balances. It's close to being a wash, with some being credit balances and some being debit balances. But in actuality, they go back several years, and those credit balances really would be an unclaimed property issue, and the
It's an
debit
individual
balances would be
achievement.
write-offs. So in anticipation of trying to work on getting that cleaned up is the reason why we put a little bit
Okay,
into bad
makes
debt.
sense, yeah.
Sounds-
I don't pity you doing this treatment.
And just to clarify about not shutting off water, it's not that people aren't paying their bills. We're just going after them. We're putting a little more customer service into them by making more phone calls, knocking on doors, that type of thing. So we didn't have to shut off. So it's not like people aren't paying their bills.
Right, but
and we're
would be a
just
thing, you know,
ignoring
if they.
it. I don't want anybody to think they don't have to pay their water bill.
No, but I mean,
That's-
you'll give them time or work out a plan for them to payment, which I think is a good thing. But you know, that's why I'd have a whole different, if we were shutting water off with water increases on a large number, I'd have a whole different opinion. So I appreciate the way that you're handling it.
That, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna admit, my water bill, I missed that. And I got a very nice email from Reese. And she's like, did you mean to, no, I did not mean to pay it right away, but it was appreciated. So, and I know that was something that you really advocated for, Mr. Mayor. So, and I benefited from that. And I included the late fee too. So please, please take that. Give you more than that. Okay. So looking at salary for water fund on page 26. So FY25, we budgeted about 235,000 for salaries. FY26, it's 212.
Yeah, it's based off time spent.
Oh,
So,
because that sort of fluctuates.
yeah.
Yeah.
It fluctuates where they spend time.
It's almost like it's, my brain's telling me it's time to wrap up. Council, how much farther down do you want to go with this tonight?
I mean, I think to me, it comes down to how comfortable everybody is with the numbers. It seems traditionally, people weren't digging into these numbers. It's staff did the research, presented it, we went on staff's recommendation. It's one thing to look at a line here or there and challenge it. It's another thing to say, we want to go line by line here and have somebody explain everything. I don't think we want to get into that.
Well, no, I think in the past too, we just kind of darted around based on the questions instead of like as a whole group work assignment, like in school, we're gonna go line by line. I did notice that, what was it, communication seems to be going up across the board. Does that tie into a bigger system?
Here.
Or maybe it's,
Communications.
oh, wait a minute, it depends on what department.
Depends where you look.
It depends on what you're like. What, I guess maybe a better question would be, what constitutes? communications?
So, in your general fund, it can range like, so under Department 10, which is your legislative, Frederick County, because Frederick County has the phone system. And then it also includes, Verizon landlines. So any of the phones, for like 22 East Main Street, some of the phones here are on, and, yeah, and then, and any cell phones that the town pays for. And, then some other, the departments, they have the internet, expense, well, it's a shared internet expense, under communications.
Okay.
That should be about pretty much it for your communications. Unfortunately for like the water and sewer plant, because of their location, we have to have a variety of internet providers, to make the systems work. But that's typically what comes up. That's what your communications is. And actually in your water, it went down
Mhm.
$300.
Okay. And I believe you clarified this last year about computer hardware, software, IT, and
Right.
so on. That you take the total and kind of sprinkle it along.
So for somebody that, for example, my laptop is crashing. Mine was bought with a COVID grant. So for me to get a new laptop, it is in the budget. And since my home department is 10, that's where we allocated the computer expense, for myself. For say water under computer, you have, you guys aren't getting anything out there. Never mind. That's a bad example.
Like buildings.
Buildings,
went
right.
up.
That desktop crashed under buildings.
Okay.
So that one is also slated to get a new computer. I
All
think
right,
there was
so
3
it's-
people.
Computer replacement cycle.
Right. We've got a staggered schedule to replace computers,
Okay.
like 2 or 3, or I think it's 3 this year.
Okay.
But also under computers is all the IT expense, because we do contract IT services out.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And software expenses as well.
Okay. Do we have new software coming online or just maintain what we currently have?
Just maintain what we have.
Okay.
So are we going to change the amounts for account 6902? That's the donations to VHC.
In the general fund,
Yeah,
right now it's at 6,000.
1,000, right. Are we talking about giving that a substantial increase?
Um. You mean in order for activities to pay for the water?
Yeah, I
Similar?
mean, if we're
Yeah,
gonna say, we move
so-
like, we're roughly saying, hey, it's $12,000 in water and we're gonna give them a $15,000 donation or a $20,000 donation. If we're gonna do that, we need to give staff a number.
Mhm. Well, I think it should be. I mean, I would turn to staff for a recommendation because we certainly want to do a best estimate on water and sewer, but also consider we're already giving them 6,000. So to go above that and what that would look like, that's something I would like to entertain, but whether it happens or not, I don't know. But long story short, I don't want to decrease, want to increase the support if need be.
I would say 15,000 for a donation to the fire department. That would include the, what did we say the activities building was, 3,600? So that would bring it to, you add the 36 to the 6 makes it the close to 10. And then from what we've seen, the other municipalities and how much they give, at least it's a bigger jump than where you guys are now. And then maybe phase in a more aggressive amount next fiscal year.
And 3,800 for sewer. You want to add
Oh, that's true. Right.
36 and 38 for the two funds.
So that's
72.
74,
13.
32.
Yeah, you're realistically looking at a
So take it
$20,000
15.
number.
Maybe 20,000 then.
Yeah, I don't have no problem with it.
All right, well, we can look at it. We'll see if the numbers even add up. Maybe it's feasible, maybe it's not.
Do you want them to put that change down for when they redo the budget?
I didn't hear it. 20? Is that what you said? 15, 20?
I,
Go ahead.
do we have to make a motion?
No.
No, this is just direction.
I would say 20.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see the budget with 20.
Yeah. At least, but I want to make sure that it's not less than what they're getting now. I want it to go up.
Yeah, with the three amounts, it comes out to 13,400. So going to 20 would increase it, which would be good.
I mean, and that might be something we need to review every year too, because if
Yeah,
water
depending on
rates are
expenses.
increasing, then the donation, we don't want to keep that stagnant for like 50 years. That's not fair.
No, I think in the past, when, if, the fire department needed help, they would come to the town,
Okay.
and things are going very well right now. Not that they wouldn't appreciate the extra funds, but don't cut us short someplace else, because the community does a very nice job of supporting the fire department.
Yes.
So
Yes, I just want to be cognizant that if we do change the donation, make it higher, that it's not something that we lock them in for 20 years. We want to be cognizant that that might need to change higher in the future. That's all.
Plus, the water rate increase in the, well, sewer as well, but both expenses are going to increase in FY26. So bumping it up is more than reasonable.
Right, yeah. Okay. Anything else? For tonight? Oh,
I just had the answer. Do you have an answer for us yet? Or do you need to come back to
I
us?
forgot what the question was.
Yeah, I think I understand the question, but just so I'm on the same page, you were asking, do we need to do something to the salary chart ordinance to account for the merit increases and the top end of the salary range? Is that what you were asking?
Or I don't see anything in the charter or code that where you can grant an increase greater than 3%. Did you find anything?
I'm gonna have to come back with
That's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that if it's not there and that's what we need, if we need to put it in, then we can look at putting something in.
So they did it under the salary chart or salary, when they did the salary study 3 years ago, the majority of people's salaries increased by more than 3%. And the board voted on that and the salaries were able to be increased. But I don't know where in the code.
I was trying to scroll through on my phone, and that's just not a good way to practice law. So
That's fine.
I'll come back and look.
I think the only other thing I have, and we don't have to talk about it tonight, is our interest policy, that we have to decide on that before we approve the budget. So if you want to do that later, we can do it later.
I wouldn't put too much off, because, we, like say, we have next month, we have to approve a budget, and we have our meeting, we have MML, so we're going to be out of town for a while. So we're going to have a real tight schedule there. So if you have anything, that you think you might want us to do, if you could kind of give it to us tonight, that would be great.
Do we already have direction on that based on the letter communication?
Well, so as of right now, it's in the interest allocation is as the state code provides it.
Okay.
It tracks. So
Okay, so
to the extent that you wanted to deviate from that, I guess that's a conversation to be had.
are you asking for it to be
Well, I don't
Stated.
think it's based on state code. The proposed policy says it will be 35% to the general fund, 27% to water, 38% to sewer for July through December. And that's based on the actual cash balance by fund as of March 31st, 2025. And then it will change to 62% to the general fund, 0% to the water fund, 38% to the sewer fund from January to June, based on the expectation that the ARPA being spent by 12/31/25. So it's still not based on the allocation, the budget in each fund.
That was just how it was budgeted, based that way, assuming, knowing that we would spend the ARPA more than likely and that we currently are having a negative water fund balance. But that is not how the actual will ultimately end. That'll be trued up.
So this is
And-
not a proposed policy.
No, that's just how we budgeted.
That's like an
Okay.
example, so to speak.
Can you send us the proposed policy?
She said yes.
Yes, did I miss that?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't look up right at that. I couldn't hear your head nod. Sorry. It's because of the reading glasses. All right.
Okay,
Anything else?
nope, that's perfect.
Anything else? Okay. So. All right. If we finished discussion for the budget, we're looking at moving on to June 2nd and setting the agenda. Which I'm not even gonna try to keep up with this as far as scribbling it down. Would you be able to email us the list?
Yes.
Um,
It is an extremely long list of things that need to be accomplished. I'm just putting that out there. All right. I'll start off with a very easy one for admin business. Approval of free pool day on Community Heritage Day for consideration.
oh, yes. And can we just make that like
Permanent?
forever so we don't have to vote on it every year?
I
What do
like
you think,
that.
Mr. Mayor?
Agree with that too.
Can we do that? Just make it forever so we don't have to vote on it every year?
That would be
Alright.
great.
Okay, yes, please. let's-
For parking too, parking
Yes.
meters and stuff too.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea for the free parking for the holiday. you mean?
Yeah.
The holidays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good to know.
Set it for the.
I will list them out. If there's a different order that you prefer, just need to let me know.
Yes,
Number one would be hold a public hearing and then consideration of ordinance 25-14 amendment to chapter 13 water rates.
okay, so wait, just to clarify, we only had one for administrative business, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Number two would be for consideration approval of resolution 25-04, approving the application and receipt of financing for community legacy facade and improvements.
Okay,
Number three, for consideration approval of ordinance 25-12, approving the town of Emmitsburg fiscal year 26 budget.
okay,
Next one would be hold a public hearing and then consideration of ordinance 25-02, amendment to chapter 17 of the town code to allow and establish requirements for student housing in the village zone district. Number seven, for consideration adoption of resolution 25-01 R, declaring the official intent of the town of Emmitsburg to reimburse from tax exempt bonds expenditures to be incurred with respect to the North Seaton Avenue Waterline Replacement and Green Street project prior to the issuance of debt. That's an MDE requirement. Next one would be for consideration approval of 25-13 amending Title 13 Stormwater Management Fund. As you remember, that was just changing it from enterprise to dedicated fund. Number nine, for consideration approval of a private stormwater management deed of easement with lots 5.6 Emmitsburg LLC and authorize the mayor to sign on behalf of the town. That's related to the Creamery Court, Federal Stone, and the two vacant lots out there. Number 10, for consideration approval of ordinance 25-08, amending Title 14, the adequate public facilities ordinance. And the last one would be for consideration approval of resolution 25-05, establishing a local school mitigation fee.
One
Oops,
question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Hoover.
The very first one was the water rate.
Yes,
Don't we need to do a hearing?
yeah, I said, hold a public
Public
hearing.
Oh, you
Yes,
did.
I did
Okay.
say
Can,
that.
I missed
can we
that.
do
Okay.
for the public hearing, provide flyers to our business owners to hand out to their customers if they would like? Because that's part of their thing. They would like. That I've gotten that question a couple times. They'd
Mhm.
asked, because we do a lot on Facebook and people see it. We still have a big chunk. And I think, if the business owners are willing to help and hand them out and give it to their customers, it'd be another outreach.
Announcing the public hearing.
Yeah, announcing the public hearing.
Okay.
Quick question, and I know we talked briefly before. Adequate public facilities and school mitigation, does that have to be on June? And if so, why?
Because it's holding Emmett Ridge 2 from moving forward. They cannot move forward until a decision is made.
Okay, and then I thought we had talked about before with the school like even if we went forward with it, it may not affect Emmett Ridge
Correct.
at all.
Which you still need your APFO.
Okay,
You may not need your mitigation fees, but you do need your APFO.
okay, understood.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? Busy night. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt our lengthy agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank
Second.
you. Is any further discussions? Okay.
We
Hearing-
we
sorry.
might move a couple of those things around because I know you like the ones that might drag a little bit, we'll put those up top.
Yeah,
Is that better?
yeah, and Ms. Willis, maybe we can touch base and figure out what's the best flow for that, especially with public hearings.
That's fine. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. I will email these to you tomorrow
Okay.
and yeah, we can figure out which the best order
Yeah.
before we post it.
Yeah, because I don't want them having to sit through all the others and,
Right.
It'll be a long night for people who might want to show up.
That's fine.
Okay. Yes, I think that needs to be worked. Right. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Hoover got in by a hair. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? No, of course not. Meeting is adjourned.
For me, so, because otherwise you can get lost.
Yeah.
Looking at the spreadsheet.
They do look really, they do look really good.
Yeah.
The wayfinding signs look really good.